this is a controversial room. We're going to have some controversy here today. Is the plan. I'll just wait till the numbers flatten out a little. Welcome, everybody. Welcome. Thank you for joining me in this room and my social traders colleagues. Hi, everybody. You can leave yourselves off mute because we're all going to be having a chat today. This is less about me and more about the room. I am your procurement provocateur for today. I'm going to make some bold statements that may or may not be true about the procurement profession, and I'd love to hear you challenge those. The main premise that this procurement provocateur is putting to you is, are social enterprises too small for procurement? Are social enterprises too small for business and government procurement? That's my provocative question to you. And as a veteran of the procurement profession, I would argue that if we don't do things differently, if we do procurement the way procurement has been done in the past, then I think that statement's true. I think that statement is true, and that procurement aren't doing enough to create space to work with social enterprise and small business. But I'd love to hear from the floor. What do we think?
Go ahead, Michelle Adler. Your hand is up.
I was just going to say spot on, Monique. I think it's that social enterprises are preparing themselves or trying to prepare themselves to work with large organisation procurement departments, but I don't believe that these companies are evolving their policies and processes to allow for and encompass social enterprise. And what I mean by that is it's the cost to business of the social enterprise to sometimes go through just the procurement process or the registration to become a supplier with these companies. It's a massive barrier, and it makes it's a big cost to business. And I think that you know, there needs to be some understanding or some what's the word, not leniency, but some kind of dispensation allowed for social enterprises, particularly startup social enterprises, when going through the procurement process in a large organisation.
And Michelle, anything in particular, like any particular aspect of a procurement process that you found to be barrier-ish?
Yeah, I'm always really surprised when they say, when you submit what you think is a perfectly fine agreement or terms and conditions, and then they get ripped apart in the legal sense. And I've taken to asking, well, can we use your agreement? But the lack of preparedness in some organisations, not all, I want to stipulate that. I have worked with some fantastic organisations who are like, let's use our copy, you can blend yours into that, let's get this done and dusted and make it happen. You know, it's just not sustainable for a social enterprise when they get a 90-page addendum to an agreement all around cybersecurity. Like that cripples an organisation when you have to get that to a lawyer and get that, you know, looked through, because it's a legal document and some of the stuff that's in there is pretty scary. So I think preparing to have even a commercially vetted copy of an agreement that can then be passed on to a social enterprise that they can then use and utilise, the offering of pro bono legal services, just having a pathway to ease the burden, I think, on social enterprise would be a huge start.
Thanks, Michelle. As the procurement provocateur, I would say that $20 million worth of professional indemnity, public liability and workers' compensation insurance is very reasonable. I'd say that indemnity clauses need to be upheld. I'd say your moral rights are really important things to be addressing in this contract. I think the assignment of IP clauses really relevant for, the work of a lot of social confidentiality. I think rigorous banding around data privacy. I think that's truly important for every enterprise that's seeking to join a supply chain. Anyone care to differ? Anyone else
Jess,
like
you
to?
put your hand up. Did you want to say something?
Yes, although not necessarily directly to that provocation. What I wanted to say is I think this is always a tricky discussion because social enterprise both operates within what exists and in order to try and change it. And there is a really tricky thing at the moment where some social enterprises are big enough to secure and manage large contracts in their own right. And there's a heap that aren't. And actually getting the trade that comes through procurement is critical to their survival and growth. So there's a problem we have to solve around building the pipeline for smaller social enterprises to be able to obtain contracts. The idea I just wanted to float, because I think it's really interesting and I'm only new to learning about this myself, is in the UK, a range of social enterprises formed a co-op, and the purpose of that co-op was for it to effectively be a sector-controlled intermediary that could take on big contracts. So I think in Australia, we've had the white box PBO where we saw an intermediary that engaged 16 different social enterprises to deliver on a particular contract. This co-op in the UK was set up to be able to do that across a whole range of social purposes and to be controlled by the sector. And really, I just wanted to share that I think that's a conversation we should be having in Australia, because we need the ability to bring together smaller enterprises that are delivering similar things to deliver those contracts in aggregate. And I'm really keen for us to be working on that here.
I can't even bring myself to provide a provocative response to that because I think it's so wonderful. It's so exciting. But I think you make a really important point, Jess, and that's the, as we would expect from you, but that's this idea of the balance between being a little patronising to social enterprises who are smart, innovative, doing incredible work, but because some of them are small and we need to acknowledge that engaging with a smaller size business or a startup business, to the point Michelle was making earlier, is a different proposition to working with a more mature enterprise. So I think, I think the procurement profession needs to realise that both things can be true. And the provocateur here says, well, procurement shouldn't change, but I believe that procurement absolutely has the ability to do better. I think we have some more hands up.
Yeah, Keith was first. Do you want to go ahead, Keith, and take yourself off mute?
Keith?
Yeah, so just in terms of contracting, taking other people's paper is always a challenge. So Minters provides some pro bono support, so that's one avenue. I always sort of, if I can, start with a sort of a term sheet or an MOU, because often you'll end up with the 100-page contract. We did the bread and butter project joint venture with Woolworths, and it had 60 pages of compliance rubbish in it, which could have been done for a pilot program on a 5-page term sheet. So there's always those challenges. It's also trying to understand what are the sort of the key issues, and I think in your provocation raised a number of them, including the control of your IP and the like. So partly often you'll get C-suite or whatever that thinks this is wonderful, and they put the halo on around themselves, and then they go and kill you with contracts. When you get into the procurement mincer or the employment team mincer or what have you. So it is getting that degree of support and trying to focus on the key issues and trying to document those, and whether it's a binding or a non-binding MOU, to at least start a pilot rather than diving into a full-scale sort of procurement process. The white box PBO took 2 years of co-design. and a whole bunch of contracts. There are other intermediaries. There's ServeGate in the Indigenous space, which intermediates between defence contracts and the like, and sort of takes those on and then builds the contractual capacity behind. And then as the social enterprise or Indigenous business builds the capacity to take on the contract, it sort of steps up and takes over. So there are some platforms like Jess mentioned, but I think it is critical to sort of try and identify what the key commercial drivers are firstly, and hopefully get the corporates on board that they need to be sympathetic. You're helping them achieve ESG outcomes, helping them potentially lower their cost of capital or meet their ESG commitments. So you are delivering value, and most social enterprises, often not-for-profits, create public value as part of their business models, and the question is how they capture some of that and the value of that. And so PBOs and the like are critical in that sense. But it's sort of stepping back and understanding what the key drivers are and trying to get agreement on those before you launch into full documentation with all of their insurance indemnities and what have you, and trying to get those balanced. Likewise on IP clauses and the like. If you can get some sympathetic discussion with corporates, hopefully they come along that journey without delivering you their standard procurement stuff.
Well, that was certainly a comprehensive summary of an overview around some areas that are relevant for social enterprise in terms of the contracting process. Our time here was short. We're being dragged back into the main room. Thanks to those of you who bravely contributed. It's a really large group. And on behalf of the procurement profession, I'd like to see us all think about what those barriers, both intended and unintended, look like, and think about ways through.